Hi, everybody. I'm Alex Paulton. I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Talking Timepieces, where we talk about watch collecting and horology. Today, I wanted to talk about branding, and it's a topic that's come up in different conversations and in different contexts. But I thought, let's just focus on that bittersweet plus minus you know, there's both good and bad yin yang tied up in branding. When you think about a brand is basically a name, right? Like a band. The best analogy I could think of is to a brand is a band because a brand is a band. Hey, Gian. Um, for example, I was thinking about the group, The Who, right? They made it the band's name is a pun. Who are you gonna see? Who? Haha, like almost a who's on first kind of joke. But they had such a unique voice and they were such great musicians that they were able to transcend the pun of their name and become a world class entertainment phenomena franchise. You know, there have been plenty of other bands who were puns that didn't go as far. And then there were bands who had not quite puns, but simple names like Yes. Yes got big, but not as big as The Who. And Yes is one of my favorite bands. Hey, Sam, how's it going? Miranda, live long and prosper. Greetings and long life. Um, but a brand is a label. It is like branding and products as well. You buy a Ritz cracker or a McDonald's hamburger, you know exactly what you're buying. Those are brands. The company owns those brands. They create them and they develop them. Gian, it's important as much for me. I shared last year why I'm all for Longines. It's because of their heritage and how they're the watch that was with the aviation pioneers. Yeah, that's actually a great point to make, Gian. But the funny thing is, there are people who would look down on Longines because of brand. Because once you get on that level treadmill, um, you can wind up becoming very snobbish, you know, which is one of the reasons, pardon me, which is one of the reasons I wanted to bring up this topic again today because of some things that happened to me this weekend, in fact, talking to people about watches. Um, for example, I was talking to a charming lady and a friend of my friend. I do have a girlfriend, and I mean charming in just a charming sense. But yeah, so this woman said, "Oh yeah, she's interested in watches," and I forgot what I was wearing at the time, but I'm currently wearing just wristwatch check. I'm wearing my Zenith El Primero Chronomaster Open Heart. I switched it to a blue leather strap instead of the black because the black came across as too formal. I mean, I still have it and I use it when I wear it with a suit mostly, but I've really fallen in love with the way this blue leather strap works. Alligator works with the El Primero, but then I'm always encouraging people to play with straps. But yeah, so I was talking about watches, and I showed her what I was wearing, and she's like, "Well, it's okay, but I only care about Rolex." And I showed her a photograph of my top 10 watch box, right? And there are two Rolexes in this thing, and she's like, "Oh, okay. Well, I like the two Rolexes," and she wasn't even that hot on the Air King, which tells me that she unfortunately has been bitten by the bug of brand snobbishness because to certain people, and it doesn't have to be Rolex, could be there are people who feel the exact same way about AP, Audemars Piguet, or Patek Philippe. There are people who feel the same way about certain brands, usually higher upstream brands. But yeah, there are a lot of people who think if it's not a Rolex, it's not even worth wearing, not even worth owning. And I mean, I can see where they can get brainwashed by the marketing hype and the excitement in the industry over expensive pieces. But branding, I mean, doesn't have to mean money. For example, the G Shock, right? Casio G Shock. that is a watch that is well respected, highly um, collected. A lot of people own one. I own one. I know people who own several, one in different colors, the same model. But and I'm one of the people who believe you should own a G-Shock. You need a beater that you can rely upon during the zombie apocalypse, and this is a good candidate for it. The Victorinox Inox is also a very good candidate. I call that the Swiss G-Shock, and there's a review of that in the archive. So Miranda, Longines are great watches. I'm having the Zulu Time GMT chronometer on my radar. I had a Zulu GMT, and I wound up selling it. And actually, it's one of the few watches I don't miss it, but I probably wouldn't have let it go, knowing how I miss it a little. But that's a great piece, that Longines. Currently, I don't have a Longines. I've always had at least one Longines. I had the Moonphase Master Collection Triple Date. That's a watch I actually do miss. But I only kind of miss it because the biggest reason I got rid of it is it had a gajillion equally glossy, polished hands, and it was difficult to tell the time at a glance. And then I actually wound up buying the Conquest Moonphase GMT, which differs from the Master Collection GMT. I mean, not GMT, Master Collection Triple Calendar Moonphase. The Master Collection is a column wheel chronograph, 7751, and the Conquest is a standard Valjoux 7751. And the Conquest, what I liked about it is at least the hands to tell time were loomed, because it's the sports version, and I thought that would satisfy me. But ironically, I like the look of the Master Collection much more, because the Conquest, the face, because of the sports model, the face was a little bit more constricted. It was a little chunkier, and I liked the wider face than the presentation of the Master Collection Moonphase. So what I want the Master Collection Moonphase with the loomed hands of the Conquest. And actually, it couldn't be the loomed hands of the Conquest. It would have to have special loomed hands made for it. Please, Longines? But no, Longines is a perfect example of a great company that, unfortunately, a lot of watch snobs turn their nose up at. I'm really glad with what Longines is doing right now with the Spirit Collection, because that's opening people's eyes to Longines again in a new way. But yeah, the problem is that there are some people who really are fixated on brand, and it makes you wonder, because the trouble, like I said, the problem with the brand is it's a double-edged sword, because the brand also assures you that the company, if it's a real product, because that's the other ugly side of branding, is that people will counterfeit that brand just to get the good faith value of the brand, identity theft. But let's just talk about straight up and down branding, because I've talked about fakes many, many times. And I think we can actually plumb the depths of the branding issue without even having to really think about fakes, because just the misconceptions and snobbery and snobbishness and just meanness. Because the other side of the coin is, never disparage someone else's watch, because watches are not a very popular thing anymore. We're all part of a shrinking community, and we should support one another. And even if you don't like that person's watch, they took the time to choose it and put it on their wrist. You can at least respect it and say, "Oh, that's interesting," or my mother said, "If you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all." But yeah, don't trash other people's watches. That's so uncool. But unfortunately, that's part of what branding does to us, because it others other things. A really funny example. Ah, darn it, and I left it in the box. But because I normally put a few pieces here that I wanted to talk about. But you know what? I'm going to go grab it real quick. It's only right behind me. And That's my Agelocker tourbillon. This is a really, really nice piece. It's running because I wore it recently, and it comes with a little power winder because it's it's a manual wind, and it's a double barrel piece. Has a double two mainsprings, and it's just a really nice watch. When you think about, this is a skeleton tourbillon with a very interesting design for under $1,000. Um, yes, it's Chinese, but like I said, as I keep telling people, uh, their Apple Watch was made in China. That their Apple phone was made in China. China is associated with cheap stuff because they're an inexpensive place to manufacture. So people make cheap stuff there. That doesn't mean China makes cheap stuff. It means they can make cheap stuff if they're ordered to make cheap stuff, but they can also make high end stuff if you pay them to make high end stuff. Flextronics is in China. And in something like this, or like the Sega Design Blue Planet, which won 2 years ago, won the Geneva Horological Association Challenge Award. Just because it's a Chinese watch doesn't mean it's a bad product. But I showed it to another friend of mine, who food service manager at our one of the local summer fests, and he looked at the tourbillon and he asked me, "Is it real?" And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, of course it's real. What you see it working. This is a tourbillon. But what he meant, if it's real, is it a Swiss-made tourbillon? And I said, well, it is made in China. And the way he shrugged and rolled his eyes is like, oh yeah, that watch is not worth his time. And I'm thinking to myself, Bish, are you kidding me? Even if you are a hardcore, luxury watch person, if you have any respect for horology, you should at least recognize that this is it's actually a significant piece in horological history. It really is. I mean, and I'm not the only one to have reviewed this piece and said what a it's representative of how China is migrating beyond making fakes to making their own watches. Like I said, Sega Design, or I mean, there are some really, really good Chinese watch companies out there nowadays. And there are a lot of companies using Chinese movements like Baltic in their pieces. You know, you China makes an inexpensive tourbillon. They also make an inexpensive microbrand. And it gets harder and harder to justify the difference between the cheapest Swiss tourbillon you can get your hands on right now is the Horage, which ironically looks a lot like this because the Horage is also a skeleton with very geometrical design language, and the Horage is like 8K. And I'm going to talk about their new micro adjustment for regulation. That's fantastic horological tech. I want to do a special episode on that. They just recently came out with a way to remotely adjust. There's a little micro motor inside of the escapement, the balance, and it allows you to use an external tool to adjust and regulate the watch without opening it. Horage is doing some fantastic stuff. And so they're breaking ground by meeting the cheapest Swiss tourbillon, and you could buy 10 of these for what that watch cost. Now, it is a fantastic piece. Or let's look at the Tag Heuer for 10K tourbillon. The other cheapest is a Tag. Are they really 10 times better? Maybe 2 or 3 times better. If you look at things like finishing mechanically, these are fine. People say, oh, I'm worried about repairs and the like. If you have the replacement parts, you can repair this thing. I mean, there are channels up showing people disassembling and reassembling it. I mean, it's a precision machine piece. You take the screws out. It's not like the screws don't fit back in. Saying, oh, can you repair this? The real question is, can you get parts for this? As long as you can get parts for this, you can repair it because it is a mechanical device. The screws do go back in when you unscrew them. It's not like it's made so crudely that you couldn't reassemble it after disassembly. I think we've gone beyond that. You know, the reason a lot of cheap watches don't get repaired is because either A, they don't cost enough to be worth the effort to repair them, or it does you can't get your hands on parts. But it's a mechanical device. If you can get your hands on parts, you can fix it. But not being able to fix a Chinese made watch has less to do with the quality of the workmanship and more to do with the supply chain for the parts and maybe the know-how to work on it, things of that nature. But to just dismiss a product because it's not a brand you recognize, but that's part of that whole mountain of mixed benefits that branding represents, you know? Um, oh my god, it's got so many comments, I gotta scroll back up. Let's see. Yeah, Sam says the Sprint Zulu is a great one. Miranda, thanks for the info about the master collection. Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure, Miranda. The Zulu with green band and brown leather. Green and brown always go well together as colors. Kareem, hey, how's it going from Dubai? Nice to see you. Really nice to see people from around the world joining and enjoying the channel. Because as I've said many, many times, I wouldn't be anywhere without you, the audience, because what makes the channel interesting, in my humble opinion, is our exchanges. I don't screen the questions before they go up. I don't. I answer everything that comes across the table. Or if I can't, I say, hey, I'll look it up and try later. But the fact that we interact in this channel is one of the things that I enjoy about it. To me, it's a growing watch community, not just a channel with people watching it. You're part of the dialogue. Let's see. Gian, lots of people don't know Amelia Earhart wore Longines. She did. Their winged hourglass logo is the oldest logo in the world, circa 1889. Well, probably the oldest registered logo, because there are a lot of logos that are older than that. The medical caduceus, for example, there are symbols. Let's put it that way. But then symbols are logos. But yeah, as far as commercial logo, yeah, Longines is the oldest, if not one of the oldest, if not the oldest. And well, see, that's one of the reasons I'm looking to get another Longines to put in my collection, because Longines is a really great watch company. And I was thinking about getting their mono pusher chronograph, but then I thought, nah. So I'm leaning more towards maybe getting their GMT diver, the new Hydro Conquest GMT. But I'm also really, if I sell a couple of pieces, I've got a couple of pieces I'm trying to get rid of. I shouldn't get rid of, move along, because they're great watches. If I can sell the ones that I'm trying to move along, I'm thinking also of maybe getting an Omega Seamaster, an Omega Seamaster, a new one, blue ceramic. Because I've had a couple of Seamasters in the past. I had the GMT review in the archive, and I really liked that piece. But I did want to get the ceramic version, because I do like ceramic bezels over aluminum bezels. The scratch resistance appeals to me. That's one of the reasons that I'm really pleased that I went ahead and I bit the bullet and I got my hands on a 126610 LN, which stands for Lunetta Noir, black bezel. So I'm guessing the Hulk version of this will be VN for vert. No, Lunetta LV, Lunetta vert for green. Or is vert green? I forget in French. I'm not very good with my French. I didn't do well in school. I do speak fluent German, but that's only because I live here. If they didn't remind me every day how to speak German, I'd probably forget in a week. Space G95. Hey, how's it going? Greetings and long life. Gian, I remember you talked about Decla. Yes, they are a good company. A lot of people think, and I kind of agree, but some of them go beyond that. But a lot of the old school German Flieger companies are one-trick ponies, and they just make German Fliegers. But a couple also make other watches, like Laco makes some other interesting pieces. IWC, of course, used to make Fliegers, and now they're a much different company. But yeah, Decla is a good company. They really are. Look, Declan, and no matter how awesome it is to configure the watch, I couldn't bring myself to consider them because they have no heritage. Well, that's where things get into in the way of having a good time is there are nice watches out there without a heritage. Like Asia Locker certainly doesn't have a heritage, but then again, they also, don't they understand what they're doing? They're selling this for under $1,000. So people who may even be brand snobbish would still be interested in at least owning it as a horological novelty. And so they managed, I think they're targeting well. But then there are people who will never consider it because it's not a name brand. But then again, how long does it take to develop a heritage? Decla's been around for over 20 years. They may not have a deep heritage, but they have a reputation, which is the first step in a heritage. Reputation is important. Like Zinn. Zinn, I put the whiskey too far out of reach. I was smart and put the water glass close. Oh, well, but now they're next to each other. Zinn, for example, has got a fantastic heritage, but that company's only as old as I am. I was born in 61, and that's when they started. So they're 63 years old too. Actually, I'll be 63 in October. But Zinn has developed a reputation and a heritage. I mean, Bell and Ross came from Zinn people. Zinn made the first Bell and Ross watches. There are companies that have earned their heritage even in a relatively short time. Like, I think Christopher Ward is busy earning a heritage. One way to do it is to do interesting horological things, right? For example, a lot of people talking about branding, a lot of people didn't take Mont Blanc seriously as a watchmaker, even though Mont Blanc makes some of the best writing instruments on the planet. And making a good pen quill is actually a piece of high-end mechanical engineering, and then putting it into a pen with a feed mechanism and all of that. I mean, we talk about watches having to be water resistant. A fountain pen, and yes, I do own a Mont Blanc fountain. I use it to write my to-do lists to keep my handwriting up. You know, this is an extremely precise piece of engineering. And as I was saying, a watch may need to be water resistant, but a fountain pen has to be watertight because it's got ink inside. You know, I mean, obviously, there's a hole in the feed mechanism to let the ink come out through the nib, but we're beyond the point of getting on an airplane and having the pen explode in your pocket. These are very well engineered pieces, and they're also beautiful. I mean, this is a pretty pen, right? And so when Mont Blanc wanted to be taken seriously as a watchmaker, they made this the first in-house movement. It is a GMT chronograph, and it's a mono pusher vertical clutch column wheel chronograph, and they made it in-house, which is what Christopher Ward is swinging for with the Bel Canto. Although they're still a step away because that's an in-house module, but it's a Solita base, which is okay because we're talking about a watch that retails for half of what most of these pieces, the higher end kind of pieces, your Mont Blanc, Nicholas Roussex, your Zenith Chronomasters, your Rolex subs, and they're doing it at half the price. I mean, the Bel Canto's a sonnery, rings every hour. Admittedly, not in a complicated fashion, but nobody else has anything even remotely like it. That's how you build a heritage and develop a reputation. Just like the G-Shock built a heritage and developed a reputation to be the field watch. Actually, Hamilton I still think is the field watch, but that's on the mechanical and old school side. But when you think about a modern, tactical, outdoorsy adventure watch, the G-Shock's going to be on a lot of most people's short lists, along with the Victorinox Inox, because I do like that piece. Suggested a friend of mine buy him because he was interested in getting something inexpensive but good looking and rugged, because he's not good to watches. And I suggested the Inox, and he bought it and he loves it. He does complain a little bit about the weight, but I said, hey, over time you get used to it, and you do. Um, let's see. Space G95 HC makes crazy cool tourbillons. Well, there are some really nice um, tourbillon. Well, the two high complications that you're seeing coming out of China that you only used to see coming out of Switzerland is, yeah, the micro rotor and the tourbillon. And I can't wait to see some of the other advanced complications come out of, because not because I necessarily want to buy a Chinese product, um, but frankly, depending on my mood, I try to avoid, because of the current, geopolitical situation. But I'm not going to talk about. I said no politics on the channel, and I'm sticking my guns. So just straight up and down, having China make good watch movements challenges the rest of the world to also make good, inexpensive watch movements. It's the competition that I welcome. And the nice thing about mechanical watches, at least, it's not like they can uh, do a pump and dump and flood the market with cheap tourbillons. They could, but because of the nature of our market, you're not going to get a lot of traction that way. I mean, in one sense, they have flooded the market with cheap tourbillons because a lot of people have purchased them, but they're not displacing the higher end products. Whereas in the case of Japan in the 70s, pushing out the American television industry with cheap TVs, those cheap products pushed out the other competing products, and that's what the Japanese wanted to do with Swiss watches during the quartz wars. They were just it was a trade war battle between the Swiss and the Japanese in the watch marketplace. I mean, not too many people outside of Switzerland and Japan really cared about the quartz crisis, actually. But the end result still, happened. And the Swiss markets rescued themselves by going up market. But which is one of the reasons I embraced the microbrand industry now, because the microbrand industry has brought back the mainstream, has brought back the lower end of the market without making it full of cheap pieces of junk. You could buy an awesome watch for $500 from a micro brand now that will rival anything that you can get from Switzerland from less than 5K. And if you get something like, Christopher Ward, for example, the 12, that rivals stuff that goes up to 10K in Switzerland. I mean, yes, the finishing is better on some of the more expensive Swiss pieces, but only just, only you'd have to really look hard. When you think about things like Baltic, what they're doing, or even a company like Nomos, right? Which I would really call a small watchmaker. I wouldn't really call them a micro brand, because their roots go all the way back to pre-World War II. The old Deutsche Uhrenwerk. In fact, Nomos watches are still in-house made by Deutschen Uhrenwerk, which means German watch factory. Deutsche, German, Uhren, Werk factory. Or it could also mean, depending on how your interpretation, Deutsche watch manufacture. But yeah, the pieces like this piece, this is an awesome watch, and it retails for less than $4,000. Look at that movement, in-house, beautiful, wave, perlage. I mean, when you think about how much goes into these pieces at these prices. Some of these brands are really, really phenomenal. And the sad thing is, a lot of people wouldn't even look twice at a Nomos because it's not, one of the big names. And that's sad. It really is sad. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation about branding, because we often overlook really nice things, and not just watches, other things. We overlook nice things just because they're not presented us in a way that we're familiar with. Bears thinking about. Let's see. Space. Aragon uses an HC Chinese automatic for their Dive Master Central Tourbillon under $1,000. See, exactly. And there are a lot of companies using Chinese movements, like I said, like Baltic, for example, and a couple of others. And well, not to mention the obvious ones like Steinhardt and Sen. I'm blanking. It'll come to me. But that's what I was saying about the micro brands are bringing back some of the cool, old, accessible part of the watch industry, that you can buy a fun, well-made, like Boulder, right? There are a lot of great companies out there now making Shinola, making great watches. Those are all brands that are eventually going to develop a heritage of their own. So it's not like brands. As I said, brands are a bittersweet plus minus. Brands can be a good thing. Brands can be used for bad things, like snobbery. I think snobbery is a bad thing, especially when you're talking about a group of people like us. When the room's not getting that much bigger anymore. And so if you find a fellow watch aficionado, if they're wearing a Nomos, don't put them down. Heck, if they're wearing a Casio G-Shock, if they're wearing they're anything, frankly. Seagull 1963. They don't you don't have to wear a high-end brand to be a collector of anything. You don't have to have a Louis Vuitton bag to be someone who likes bags and is a bag collector. You don't have to have Gucci shoes or the latest top end Nikes to be someone who likes shoes and collects shoes. To be a collector means you want an eclectic experience. You want to experience different things. You want to enjoy different things. And unfortunately, that can migrate into snobbery and elitism. You know, you start by drinking wine and just enjoying wine, and a few years later, you're at the same festival, walking by the booth you used to spend time at, and walk past them to the fancy booth because you want your friends to see that you're drinking the good stuff. The other stuff was perfectly fine for you until you had more money. Just like this Nomos is as good as anything Rolex makes. Um, the Rolex may have a slightly actually, the Rolex does have a little bit higher level of finish in the case, for example, but the Nomos case is awesome. The Rolex case, it does come across a little bit better, but not 4 times better, 5 times better. Movement wise, no. The Deutsche Uhrenwerk movement in this toe to toe with anything coming out of well, anywhere in Switzerland. I mean, Glashütte, a lot of the companies in Glashütte, like Langenhain. No, Langenhain's out of Dresden, but Glashütte, Dresden, they're in the same area in East Germany, which is why a lot of those watch companies haven't been known until recently, is because they were stifled under the Cold War. They weren't able to come back into the marketplace until the 90s. That's only 30 years ago, or depending on how you look at it. Oh my God, the 90s are 30 years ago. Because a lot of people, think the 90s are like 10 or 20 years ago. But if you focus too much on branding, you're going to miss out on a lot in any industry. And that's all I wanted to say. Let's see. Gian, registered logo. Trap Vision 3D. Good afternoon. Yeah, greetings and long life. You're sharing knowledge with us on Sundays is a great thing. Oh, thank you. I appreciate you enjoying these conversations. Trap Vision. I really like Longines. Their Hydro Conquest line is amazing. Yeah, like I said, I'm really thinking of getting the Longines GMT, the Hydro Conquest GMT. And the interesting thing is that now that I have the sub, right? Maybe I shouldn't get the Seamaster for my blue watch, get the Longines for my blue watch. The Longines costs half of what the Seamaster costs. And if you, like I said, if you're thinking about brands, because the Longines, the Omega is slightly better finished than the Longines, but not that much more. And if I needed to go see snobby people, I'll wear this to go see snobby people. I don't have to worry about having an Omega. And then I wear the Longines when I just want to enjoy wearing a really cool watch. Like for example, traveling, because my family lives in, I grew up in Queens. I'm thinking of going early December to go visit. And Hydro Conquest GMT be a cool ass watch to travel with. I must admit, I do really like traveling with my IWC Saint-Supri because it is also a GMT. The second time zone's in the little window, so it's a little bit more of an elegant presentation of a GMT, and it's an IWC Flieger, a very Flieger. It's a traditional Flieger. Which one of the things I like to point out to people, and they don't realize, is that the Air King is an old school Flieger design in reality, and the aspect of the specific design, it's based on the dashboard instruments from the British car that broke the land speed record and the speed of sound. In fact, the Rolex made the dashboard instruments for them, and so they based the Air King, the original Air King, even not the original Air King from the 50s. I mean the most recent iteration that came up in this century of the Air King. This is the newer Air King. You could tell this is the newer Air King because it has an 05 instead of a 5 to balance the face out, and also this is a true sports case now. So it has crown protectors, and it's got the sport bracelet. I think I did a short on it, but I got to do. I've started to do individual watch shorts just to get all of the pieces in the collection out and let people see them for a minute, because I'm realizing that as much as I was hesitant to do shorts, a lot of people don't want to watch 8 to 10 minutes of video anymore, which is a little funny. But yeah, I'm making a series. I've already made several 1-minute watch close-ups. I had started the quick close-up series, but that was using non-cell phone format, horizontal, and the way YouTube does it, it has to be the vertical cell phone format in less than a minute to be in the shorts category. So I managed to get a proper rig set up, got myself a lavalier with a USB plug so I could get some good voice on it. And so I've been plugging my way through watch shorts, and I don't think I have done the Air King yet. But the headline title is going to be Rolex finally got the Air King right, because the first generation one was essentially a Milgauss with a different face. And this one is more of its own watch, or I should say more of a Rolex sports watch, because it has the same movement as the no date sub, the new no date sub, 3250, something like that. I got to look up the numbers again. That's the one problem being a watch guy. You have to memorize so many damn movement numbers and model numbers. It took me a week before I memorized the 126610 LN for the sub that I own. So, Kareem, hey, how's it going? Greetings and long life. It is actually my pleasure to join this great conversation. I'm really enjoying listening to you. I'm touched. Thank you. Well, as I was saying, this channel is nothing without you all. I would just be some guy talking about watches to the walls. I mean, I probably would still do it, but it's nicer to do it with you. And the whole interaction that we have is what makes this, like I say, I consider it more of a watch community than a channel. It's us, because without you, like I said, I'm nothing. You know, it's a seesaw. If there's not somebody on each end, it's not very fun. So, Space Trap, you heard Longines logo and had to hop in. Trap Vision, Space G, you already know. Gian, thanks for emphasizing about Decla. Is Decla a gimmick about them configuring watches? Will you buy one if given the chance? Also, awesome shot at whiskey. I wouldn't say that configuring is a gimmick. Configuring is a value add. Nowadays, I've done an episode on it, and I might do another one and bring the subject up again. But modern manufacturing technology, Industry 4.0. I've been to factories because my day job, I'm a tech journalist. I've been to factories that manufacture. I was at the Vicor facility, for example. Vicor makes power supplies for the most outrageous stuff, military aerospace stuff. They make the best power supplies in the world, and from some people's point of view. And you can go on their website and you can order 10 of a product, and they'll make 10, which in the old timey days was literally physically impossible. And now they can adjust the assembly line on the fly and make a different configuration of product, 10 of them, and ship them to you. And so what Decla is doing is they're taking that capability and they're turning it into a value add. So, okay, we don't have a heritage, but we make good watches, and we'll make one exactly the way you want it, which is a strong selling point. So Decla is saying, okay, fine, maybe we don't have a heritage, but we make good watches. And if you want a blue watch with a gold bezel and a steel case and a brown calf leather strap, we got it for you, because modern manufacturing flexibility gives it to you. And some companies just simply put out different colors, like Oris, bunch of different colors, Omega, bunch of different colors. Some companies pump out tons of different colors, Doxa, and Decla. They're not that big, right? So they can't make 10,000 watches, 100 in each color or something like that. So they split the difference and they say, okay, we'll make you the watch that you want, because we can't make separate, product families of all of these different watches. So we'll make you yours. And they can do it with modern manufacturing. So it's not a gimmick. It's it's a value add, because a gimmick would be something that they would just, doesn't mean a lot. It's a gesture. But having a custom made watch is not a gesture. And it's not a gimmick in that it's flimsy and shallow. No, they just use the parts that you specify to make the watch. And it's worth what you pay for it. I mean, Decla is as good as anything in the $500 to $1,000 price range, But then again, you could go to Turnby, who is also an old school Flieger watch company, and get something from them if you like what they're doing. You see, so you don't have to get a custom watch if you find something you like from someone else that maybe has a little bit more interesting thing, like the Turnby. They make a nice Flieger with a Unitas movement, a visible, and the Unitas is an old pocket watch movement that really looks nice. So if you wanted to get a watch that just had a really nice visible movement, Flieger style, you can get a Turnby, for example. But if you get the Decla, you could probably, I don't know what movements they have on offer, but you can probably get something with a nice movement with a visible back that'd make you happy. But that's part of what the fun of shopping around is, The hunt is almost as satisfying as owning, sometimes more. Miranda, my beater watches I wear 90% of the time are my Hamilton Railmaster and Pioneer Pilot, both $1,000 watches, both unique and not your typical khaki design. Boom. That's the thing. Enjoy what's out there. There's so many beautiful, fun watches out there. You don't have to buy the one that everybody wants. You don't have to buy, or buy that and then buy some others. Like I have some pieces that I consider relatively interesting and not unique but rare. Like I managed to get my hands on a new old stock Walkman. A lot of people know the Walkman Triple Date, which is also a very popular piece. Walkman was a guy in America who would import European watch parts and assemble them and sell them. And a lot of different companies use that approach. And there are a lot of watches that look very similar with different names. But the interesting thing about Walkman is that they were bought by the company that eventually became Breitling. So some people look at Walkman as like, proto Breitling. And this one is specifically interesting because it's a flyback, but it's an old school flyback design, inexpensive. It had a separate pusher. No, actually, this would be the extra pusher. It had an extra pusher to zero the subdials, because under normal use, the subdials would just freewheel along with the movement. And so before you started to use the stopwatch, you had to zero the subdials. So you had a button to zero the second hand, which of course is stationary when not in use, and a button to zero the subdials. So this is an interesting little flyback, and this is worth about $1,500, more because it's vintage. If they made a modern version of this, probably cost more. Walkman's a company that somebody could bring back. They're bringing back so many companies. That's what I'm saying. This is, the time of the microbrands and resurrected brands. Look at Nevada Grinchen. Talk about a company I didn't expect to come back. That's a mouthful of a name, Nevada Grinchen. I had actually thought about buying one of their vintage GMTs. They made some really good watches. And the company that picked up the logo, the symbol, the brand, they're doing a good job. Which is, I'm hoping, if Breitling does half the job with Universal Genève that Nevada Grinchen's owners have done with them, then Universal Genève will be cool. Which also reminds me of another piece in my collection, which is, off the beaten path. This is a Universal. This is an Universal Genève Senna racing watch, and it has a Valjoux 7750 inside. A very basic Valjoux 7750, the cleanest Valjoux I've ever seen. No decoration on it at all. But it is a 200-meter steel case chrono with screw down pushers even. This was made right after they were bought by the Chinese company. This is a Swiss-made piece, and it eventually became a Chinese boutique brand before Breitling bought them last year or early this year. And this watch almost saved the company because it's a nice piece, but not quite. These black pieces were supposed to be carbon, but if you notice, they just screwed them to the front of the links. The links are all actually metal links, and so these are actually decorative bits. It's not a bad looking piece with that, but it's really funny how it's almost a great watch. It's a very good watch, and a great watch might have saved the company, but it's almost a great watch. It's really funny. So, Space G95. For those of us with limited means, these Chinese movements give us access to complications that were formerly unattainable. Bing! It was the only tourbillon I own, And actually, this is my second Chinese tourbillon. I had a Reef Tiger, and I have a video on that piece as well in the archive. And I gave it to a friend, and he still has it because he was getting a new job, and I wanted to give him something to motivate him. And so I gave him the Reef Tiger, and it's still serving him well. So, and I couldn't afford a tourbillon before this. I did have a micro rotor, but it was a vintage piece. But and frankly, if Baltic made larger pieces, because they tend to make 38s, and I do have an 8.5-inch wrist. I do like larger pieces because I have big hands. If Baltic made a 40, I'd be all over it. One of their nicer casual dress pieces or something along those lines. I'm thinking about the Baltony American homage. That's a nice piece. That square piece with the offset face. But another example, the micro brands are really doing some cool stuff. Although that is an homage, but at least it's a cool homage of a watch that most people will never see in their lifetimes. Whereas a Rolex homage is copying a big mainstream piece that everybody wants. Whereas the Americano homage is more, here is a whimsical high-end watch that you probably have never seen, but we'll make an homage of it so you have an opportunity to enjoy it. So I agree with you. L Train, hey, how's it going, L Train? Greetings and long life. Space heritage is not too important to many people with limited income. Well, but the thing is that you can have a limited income and buy a watch with a heritage. Like you could buy a used $500 or less Hamilton khaki field, or I keep bringing up G-Shock, but it's true. This is heritage. This has reputation. And this, I think I paid 150 for it. Should always own at least one watch you can trust, in the zombie apocalypse. So you don't you can buy brands with reputation and heritage and respect and not spend over $1,000 on a watch. I mean, a lot of them would be vintage, but not all. And when it comes to vintage, you can get some really, really nice stuff, or even new pieces, right? Let's say, for example, you didn't have the scratch to buy a Speedmaster, right? The Bull of a Lunar Pilot is a damn good alternative, and the Meteorite dial version, you could almost argue is a better piece because it's got the high beat quartz, it's got Meteorite, so space, and the original lunar pilot was worn on the moon by Dave Scott, commander of Apollo 15. So you got Brand, Bulova. Bulova was involved in the space program from Jump Street, from day one. I'm not going to jump up and grab it again, but the Accutron, Bulova was in the space program from day one, and they made the lunar pilot because they kind of felt missing. They felt they were missed out on the astronaut side because their pieces were in the dashboards. They used because it was an electronic watch and could be driven by current. They literally used the Accutron as a dashboard clock in a ton of spacecraft. And Bullet was just feeling a little, butthurt from not having an astronaut watch, and so they gave Dave Scott the lunar pilot, and he wore it on the moon. It's a longer story, and there are other channels you can look at. I mean, I've talked about it as well, but there are a lot of people who've talked about the history of the lunar pilot. And it really is, like I said, if you don't care about mechanical movements, this is the better solution because this watch, you can still, they've sold out, but I've seen it online at like Chrono for still like 15, 17. We're under $2,000 with a Meteorite dial watch with a lunar background, beautiful piece, gorgeous piece, and it won't break the bank. I mean, okay, it's all relative, right? $1,500 for people. I paid 13 for mine because I bought it right out of the gate as soon as I saw it was available. I bought it, ordered it, and the moment I saw it, because I really, really, I always wanted a good Meteorite dial, and I owned the Boulder Meteorite dial, and I was thinking about getting the Zealous Meteorite dial, but it sold out. So when this came out, I didn't even bother to hesitate, and I bought it. But I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you could buy 4 of these for what a Speedmaster costs, right? And frankly, to the average person, they wouldn't know, and to a watch person who knows, they would respect it. So you don't have to break the bank to get a watch with heritage, with reputation, with desirability. You have to shop around and you have to be savvy, but that's part of the collecting. The beautiful part of the collection journey is the learning and understanding and recognizing. That's also part of the beautiful part of collecting. We're 5 minutes before the top of the hour, so just giving you guys and gals a warning. Formula Whiplash. Hey, how's it going? I was issued a G-Shock during my Navy career, trusted my life and others to it. Boom. Not an expensive piece. Tremendous heritage. See, Formula Whiplash, thank you for the service. That's true. Thank you for your service. Uh, Sheehan, everyone else, Miranda, Formula, always saying hi to everybody. Great community. Love this more personal type of channels. Well, I mean, there are enough channels ranting, Miranda, about, oh, Rolex sucks. Or, this is part of what I'm railing about in today's episode, branding. There are too many channels that just focus on branding. We rank 5 watches. Who cares? Don't rank 5 watches. Tell me about the 5 watches and I'll choose which one fits my style. Say 5 watches that are great for the outdoors, or 3 watches that went to the moon, actually only 2. Well, a couple of Rolexes went to the moon, but they went under the spacesuit. So I consider them passengers. Um, but yeah, there's too much in our industry focusing on one-upmanship and snobbery and judging people and judging other watches, and that's not what collecting's about. Do you see a train collector go into someone else's basement and go, "Oh, that's not the right model"? No. Weirdly enough, a lot of other collecting uh, hobby groups are way more supportive of each other than the watch community. But I think that's because, unfortunately, the watch community, like the car community, hobbyists bump into speculators, who bump into financiers, who bump into market manipulators. There's too much money in watches for it to be a clean hobby in that sense. You know what I mean? Let's see. Trap Vision. It appears that some micro brands are creeping up in price, like the name brands. Well, they want to go up market. I'm hoping they won't go too far up market. But I mean, if you think about something, like I said, the Christopher Ward 12, right? The 12. That's pushing 1,500. It's probably worth that. Compared to a Swiss piece like the PRX, who costs less, but is not as well finished a piece. The movement's not as nice, in my humble opinion. I mean, the Christopher Ward's got I shouldn't say just, it's got a Salida, and the PRX has got an ETA, but it's the Powermatic 80 version with the plastic parts in it, which to some purists would be unacceptable. There are pluses and minuses with all of the brands and all of the products. That's part of like I was saying, part of the beauty of the hunt, of the search. Let's see. Ian, it would be nice if you could keep some of the watches you show us on display so we can look at details longer without pausing the live stream and having to catch up later. Well, the problem is that when you do a live stream, unless you have really fancy software and all, I would have to literally hold it here while I talked. But I'm making shorts on all of these pieces. In fact, I just posted a short on this piece, a 1-minute short, and then you can watch it. But yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm making my quick view close-up shorts for the channel, so the watches that you like in my collection, you can pull up and take a look. I recognize it doesn't happen as easily here, but here I'll hold this up for a little bit longer for you, because that is a beautiful piece, the Lunar Pilot. And the nice thing about that crystallization of the meteorite material, it's unique to meteors because of the millions of years it takes in unusual circumstances. And because it's a crystalline structure, each face is different because they're different slices of the chunk. So it's just a beautiful piece. I hope that helped satisfy you. I never want to disappoint you all out there in the audience, but I do have shorts on most of these, and eventually shorts for each one of the pieces in my collection will be up. And I also have a 6-month, 8-month state of the collection video, which all of the pieces, and some of the ones that I've already sold since. So if you look at that, you get to see all of them, plus ones that aren't even here anymore. Please. Sam, I guess China, who owns the chronograph, well, it depends on the chronograph. The one everybody talks about from China is the Seagull 1963, and that's actually an old Venus movement that the Chinese licensed, bought everything, the tooling and everything from Switzerland, because the Venus company, they did it during the quartz wars, and everybody had just come out with, the people were starting to come up with their own automatic movements, the 7750 and the like. And Venus wanted to make their own, and designing a movement's expensive. So they took one of the movements they had on the shelf, a hand wound, column wheel chronograph and offered it to the Russians, who turned them down, and they wound up selling it to the Chinese, who make it to this day. That's why the everyone says how the Seagull 1963 is such a sleeper watch, because it's less than $500, but it's a column wheel chronograph, and some models even have a swan neck regulator, depending on what model you get and who makes them. Because there are several companies that make Seagull watches, and you'll have people say some are real Seagulls and not, but they're all licensed by Seagull. Seagull makes the movements even for the ones that aren't Seagull, you know. So it's more of Flieger. I would almost put the Seagull in the category of Flieger. A lot of companies make them, but they're all actual. In the case of Seagull, they still are all tied to original Seagull movement work, because they all still use the same Seagull movement, the exact same Seagull movement. Just some make different cases, and some have a more direct lineage to the Seagull company. But yeah, that is owned by the Chinese, but they bought it. The micro rotor, they probably developed them. I forget who makes the micro rotor. I'm not sure if Seagull makes it, but the one that Baltic uses. But that's a great piece. But yeah, they're the Chinese are moving up. They really are. And like I said, watches like the Eschlocker Tourbillon, and I'll hold this up for a little bit longer. Watches like the Eschlocker Tourbillon are great examples of how far the Chinese have come, because this is not a copy. This isn't an homage. It's their own design, you know, or some design companies within China. Because I've seen some other companies with this basic skeleton movement, but it could also be Asia Lucker selling their movement to other people. But the fact is that this is a Chinese tourbillon, and it's not a copy of somebody else's tourbillon. Just like the Sega design Blue Planet, which I gave to my niece. It won the Geneva Horological Awards. You know, the Chinese are really moving up. They're making some nice stuff. Miranda, I can recommend collecting Victorinox knives. They do make great knives. Space G95, collecting at attainable prices, what I call balling on a budget. Good one. 1990s was indeed 30 years ago. Thanks for reminding us, old farts. Oscar's here. And Oscar, you always chime in just as I'm about to get off. Trap Vision, in my opinion, glycine is one of the most underrated. Agree. They used to be the GMT that pilots wore during Vietnam. You know, everybody forgets glycine in the shadow of the GMT master, but glycine was there first, and has a heritage. Oh my God, with the American military, as you point out here, Trap Vision, rich history. Funny thing is, the Glycine Airman hardly ever gets recognition for completing a space mission back in '65. That's right. You can buy a rendition of that model for less than $700. That's right. Glycine is great. I've had some glycines. They're good pieces. Gian, I've limited income, but in the UK, can finance a watch. Don't finance watches. Don't buy any watches on credit. Save up for them. In the time you're saving up, you can do more research. All my Longines are 30-40% on sale. Trap Vision, my funds are limited as well. I'm finding companies like Aragon, Glycine, Long Island. Long Island's good too. I like him. And San Martin. And try the new one from Jody from Just One More Watch. Is it Aragon or something like that? I forget the name of the company. Iraq Space Spec Ops. Hey, how's it going? Thanks for the content. Thank you. I'm the most isn't it nice to say? Well, the thing is, why have ill will to a brand? I mean, that's the thing. This is not a hobby to be judgmental in. You can be judgmental, but what's the fun in that? You know, enjoy watches. Enjoy the hobby. Compliment your friend's watch. And if you don't like it, say, "Ooh, it's interesting." Have him tell you about it, or her. Maybe they'll sell you on the watch. Okay. Well said. All right. Now, as I've said, you know, I love it when we're rocking and rolling, but we're actually past the top of the hour. I always like to end it, especially when we're on a roll, because then we know we have something to talk about next week. So you all have a fantastic week and have a great evening. And I'll see you next Sunday. Take care, everybody.